Is Edward Scissorhands really a Christmas movie? Even though it doesn't feature reindeer or mistletoe, I'm here to tell you why this dark fairy tale is the perfect film to get you in the holiday spirit. Why is it snowing, Grandma? Where does the snow come from? A little girl asks an elderly Winona Ryder, and that's where it all begins. In a sunny town where it never snowed until the enigmatic Edward arrived. It's Kim herself, the protagonist of the story, who recounts what happened that Christmas when a strange man with scissors instead of hands turned the life of the whole town upside down. Like any holiday tale, there's Christmas, there's snow, and of course, there's a moral. Appearances can be deceiving. Despite the bright colors of the houses and the neighbors' clothes, their insides are as dark as Edward's appearance, who, nevertheless, is a pure and kind soul. Christmas has arrived, and it's time to get nostalgic. The ugly sweaters, the hot chocolate, and Christmas movies are a tradition impossible to ignore during the chilly December. I'll be the first to admit that when you hear Christmas movie, Edward Scissorhands may not be the first title that comes to mind. After all, it has more of a gothic, creepy vibe than your traditional feel-good holiday fare, right? But hear me out. I really believe this 90s icon deserves its place among the very best Christmas movies ever made. Unlike other classics like It's a Wonderful Life or Home Alone, Edward Scissorhands is a Christmas movie for the extravagant, the weird, the loners, and those for whom Christmas has always been uncomfortable or different. Christmas is also for the outcasts, and that's why Tim Burton presents us with a modern Frankenstein. I remember the first time I watched it. It must have been ages ago, maybe in high school. Honestly, it kind of freaked me out at the time. I mean, the poor guy has scissors for hands, for God's sake, and everyone treats him like some kind of freak. It was so sad to watch, but over the years, something about Edward Scissorhands just always stuck with me. Every Christmas, now I feel like I need to revisit it, and the more I watch, the more I realize what a beautiful story it is. We've all felt like outsiders at some point, trying to find where we fit in. So hear me out. And for this one, you really couldn't ask for a more talented cast with Johnny Depp, Winona Ryder, Diane Wiest, and more brought together by visionary director Tim Burton. It had a modest budget, but dripping with imagination and personality. It didn't make a killing at the box office, but hey, it's not about the money. Back then, people weren't ready for a gothic Christmas tale. But you know what? Tim Burton wasn't here to follow the rules. He'd later drop The Nightmare Before Christmas just to prove that point. And get this, Tim says it's not his best work, but it's his favorite. I'm with him on that. Let me explain why it is a Christmas movie. Even since the beginning, the film kicks off with a grandmother narrating to her granddaughter behind a snowy backdrop, retelling the strange yet undeniably true story of an odd but one-of-a-kind young man, Edward. This guy wasn't your run-of-the-mill character. He was an experiment crafted by a scientist who managed to create artificial life. The wise man attempted to have a child but failed, and thus Edward was brought to life. Or should I say, carefully dissected and reassembled to life. However, before he could finish, there was a crucial detail missing: his hands, which he temporarily substituted with prosthetics made from various sets of scissors. Enter Peg from down the block doing her Avon sales rounds. This lady had persistence. It took 3 tries to get Edward to open the door without stabbing her. Once she saw his equipment, you could say she was cut short. But she took pity on the lonely lad and brought him home, hoping he'd fit right in. If only she knew the chaos his scissors would soon cause. The clash between the gentle yet peculiar Edward and the hypocritical American society of the time was inevitable, especially when he fell in love with the saleswoman's daughter, Kim. And so begins one of Tim Burton's key works, alongside Beetlejuice or Batman Returns, and also one of his most iconic, not to mention personal. Edward himself is somewhat a reflection of the director, as deep down, Tim wants to share his life in a sweetened and poetic manner. Turns out the very concept of Edward Scissorhands draws inspiration from the director's tumultuous adolescence in the residential area of Burbank, California. Did you know that? Throughout his teenage years, Burton felt like an outcast who didn't fit into the hypocritical, bourgeois, conformist, and normal society of his region. As a result, the alienation he experienced and his self-perception mirrored that of a monster, incapable of interacting with others without causing harm or being harmed. This idea was captured in a drawing he created of a slender man with hands ending in points. But hey, my friend, if you're not a fan of Tim Burton, you'll probably loathe this movie altogether. From the treatment of a romantic relationship with that brooding, idealistic, and impossible touch, to aesthetics, set designs, and the gothic tone of the narrative. And it's okay, this movie may not be for everyone. But don't leave just yet. Setting aside that, we've got to acknowledge that Edward Scissorhands is quite possibly one of Tim Burton's most brilliant films. Burton crafts an outstanding fable about the monstrous nature of humanity through a Christmas tale, showcasing how the monster is far more tender, profound, and benevolent than the mundane people, proud to be the epitome of America with their houses, televisions, cars, perfect dentures, and self-satisfied lives in a world brimming with comforts, living superficial existences. Through this fable-like narrative, Burton introduces Edward, embodied by the brilliant Johnny Depp. Fun fact, legend has it that Tom Cruise could have played Edward. Rumor has it that when Tom Cruise was considering taking on the role of Edward, he asked questions like, "But how does he go to the bathroom? How did he survive without eating for so many years?" Like, bro, it's a Tim Burton fairy tale. It's not supposed to make total logistical sense. And let me be clear, I love Tom Cruise, but the magic of the film lies in playing with innocence, as if we were still children. That's how festive movies are meant to be experienced. It's the only way. Thankfully, Burton ultimately chose the young Depp, who had only 6 roles under his belt at that time. Since then, Depp has gone on to have an incredible career-long partnership with Burton, one that saw them bring many iconic characters to life in movies like Ed Wood, Sleepy Hollow, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Dark Shadows, and many more. Depp portrayed the artificial being, a tender and sensitive robot with an artist's soul, and a docile and gentle nature exceptionally well. Did you know that Edward's character only utters 169 words throughout the entire film? That's why Depp spent hours watching Charlie Chaplin films to learn how to portray a character without dialogue. Not that he needs to talk much, because he never really had the chance before. He's plucked from his comfort zone, his father's mansion, and thrown into the materialistic frenzy of a Californian suburban neighborhood, where people not only try to take advantage of him, but also humiliate him for not being like everyone else. You know, despite Edward's crazy scissor hands and the fact that he never quite gets the girl, Kim, played by Winona Ryder, he stays true to himself and what he believes in. It's kind of like how people judge him just by his weird appearance without really getting to know him. But come to think of it, Beauty and the Beast could be another fitting tale for Edward Scissorhands. In this case, replace the peasant with the high school cheerleader and the prince turned into a beast with a kind of Frankenstein who suspiciously resembles Robert Smith of The Cure. Unfortunately, Kim and Edward didn't really end up happily ever after, like the Disney couple. But their unrequited love adds that touch of tragedy that hooks me, reaching its climax in the scene where Kim dances under the snow from the ice sculpture Edward carves in the garden. What really drives me crazy is that the two actors fell in love on screen, but also off-screen. They became one of the most popular couples of the 90s, setting trends with their unique style. Depp was madly in love with Winona. Come on, let's not forget that Winona Forever tattoo he sported for years. And we can't blame him, it happens to all of us. In the film, they knew how to convey the required tenderness. And let's be honest, we all got a bit emotional during their tearful goodbye in the movie. Their on-screen chemistry was something else. Not many movie couples have pulled that off in the history of cinema. And even though the movie doesn't technically start at Christmas, it sure wraps up there. It shows how Edward tries to fit into this completely new society for him, trusting the wrong people and ending up hurt. So, without giving too much away, hope it's not a spoiler, by the end, this overwhelmed young guy, surrounded by all the colorful and consumerist Christmas cheer, decides to step back and enjoy the season in his own way. And yes, he ends up making snow for the entire town. And no, it's not a sad ending, because, let's be real, December is a bit of a struggle for some people. For some, it's a downright ordeal, either because they don't like the season in general, or they don't get along with their families. But Edward Scissorhands manages to perfectly capture that sense of loneliness, isolation, and the struggles that come with Christmas, turning it into a new experience that, in the end, brings joy to more than a few. I'm between them. So, in a nutshell, Edward Scissorhands is a delightful and heartwarming tale that fits just right for the upcoming holiday season. Well, that's a wrap for our dive into the magic world of Edward Scissorhands. I hope I convinced you all that it deserves a spot on your Christmas movie list. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe so you don't miss any future reviews. So please share them in the comment section below. Have a wonderful holiday season, everyone!